And let's get you details of what really played out in the United Nations General Assembly last night when there was a vote against Russia being a part of the Human Rights Council, especially with all the atrocities that have come to light in Ukraine. The United Nations General Assembly has suspended Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. This comes after Kyiv accused Moscow of human rights abuse and war crimes in Bucha. This US-led push garnered 93 votes in favor of suspension. 24 countries voted no and 58 countries abstained. India is among the countries that abstained, as among the 58 abstentions. New Delhi has again reiterated that we want peace and continued dialogue. Meanwhile, pictures coming in from Kyiv and northern Ukraine are stunning the world. The fact that you've got those horrifying details of the massacre in Bucha didn't exactly play out in Russia's favor. And that perhaps is what prompted this kind of an unprecedented step of Russia being ousted now from the UN Human Rights Council. And let's take this across to Gaurav Sawant and Geeta Mohan, who've been getting us every single update from the ground. Gaurav reporting there from the capital city of Kyiv. Geeta Mohan joining us from Luhansk. Gaurav, I want to come across to you first. The big story that everyone's talking about is that unprecedented step of Russia being thrown out of the UN Human Rights Council. How is Ukraine taking this news? Because just a few days ago, you had Zelensky appealing, saying remove Russia from the Security Council.
Ukraine has thanked the world for overwhelming support in Russia's suspension from the UNHRC. Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, took to Twitter to say that he's thankful to the world, he's thankful to the countries that have voted against Russia, saying that they are on the right side of history, and the fact that, according to Ukraine, Russia, accused of war crimes, should not have a place on the UNHRC. So, while this move has been welcomed by Ukraine, there is also the realization of the fact that these steps are merely symbolic and they will only push Russia against the wall. Will it deter Russia from taking the kind of actions that Russia has been taking in the past 43 days and intends to take, especially towards the south and east of this country, where intense operations continue around Mariupol, where once again Ukraine has issued and accused Russia of killing 5,000 innocent people in Mariupol, a charge that Russia has denied, leveling counter-allegations against Ukraine, saying that they've been carrying out false flag operations like in Bucha. So allegations and counter-allegations continue, but on Russia's suspension from the UNHRC, Ukraine has welcomed the move.
And I want to also bring in Geeta on this. Geeta, how has Russia reacted to this development of them being removed from the UN Human Rights Council? They're not going to be happy, of course, but what really is the reaction from Kremlin so far?
Well, the last time a country was suspended from the United Nations Human Rights Council was in 2011, Libya. But the difference this time around is that that was by consensus. Here there was voting. 93 voted in favor, and that's why we see Russia is out of the Human Rights Council. But this is symbolic more than anything else. What will happen at the most? Russia will not be able to attend Human Rights Council sessions and will not be able to partake in the conversations and discussions. Beyond that, this certainly is going to, in many ways than one, provoke Russia. This is a war between Russia and the United States of America more than Russia and Ukraine. And US, with the negotiations in the United Nations, managed to get the votes to oust Russia from the Human Rights Council. But Russia remains a P5 member, and in crucial decisions in the Council, in the Security Council, there is not much that can be done. So there is a shift in the entire global order that we are looking at, and the reactions that are coming in from most quarters. Let's talk about the abstentions. India abstained, and while India condemned the killings and the fact that the invasion and the kind of violence that Ukraine has witnessed is absolutely condemnable, India also said that instead of looking at Russia and blaming Russia for war crimes or genocide, the fact that there have been no investigations, that independent investigations should be carried out before calling out a country and blaming a country for such serious crimes is something that should be looked into. So most of the countries that abstained had the very same explanation, including the ones who voted against the resolution. They're saying that first investigations, independent investigations, should have been carried out before putting this entire resolution to vote.
Gaurav, you did tell us that Ukraine has welcomed this development, but what really will this mean on the ground as far as the war, the conflict is concerned? Are we going to be seeing bigger escalation from Russia to send out a message to the world that none of this matters to them? No amount of sanctions or isolation matters?
This step is not likely to have any positive impact on Russia or the operations that are continuing, because Russia intends to bash on regardless. That's exactly what Russia has been doing, and even as we speak, there is an air raid siren that goes off. All lights have gone off, and this is an indication that Ukraine fears that there could be an amplification of operations, not restricted just to the south and the east, but those operations could also extend to Kyiv. There is a real apprehension that Russia could target Kyiv once again after not succeeding in the first part of these operations. As far as the south and east of this country are concerned, whether it's in Mariupol or in Kherson or even Odessa, Russia continues to target Ukraine from the sea. The apprehension is that these operations are only likely to intensify in the times ahead.
Gaurav, stay safe out there. We're going to let you go because those sirens mean you have to go inside, stay safe and go underground. So we'll let you go for the moment. Thank you for those details. I want to take this across finally to Geeta one last time. Geeta, we've seen that Russia in these cases and in these circumstances, whenever there's been sanctions or any such drastic step, has always responded in kind, a tit-for-tat response. What's going to be Putin's next game plan?
Well, Putin's next game plan, well, he has already spelt out what the game plan is. The withdrawal from Western Ukraine was not because they were being pushed out, more so because Putin said that they did exactly what they wanted to in Eastern Front, which is capture Mariupol, capture Volnovakha, very crucial cities. They're looking at Mariupol, Melitopol, Kherson, that is a land bridge between Crimea and Donetsk. They've managed to do that. And now what they're trying to do is, after having scattered Ukrainian forces all across the country, they're now focusing energy on the Eastern Front, west of Donbass, west of Donetsk and Luhansk, to consolidate their position. So fierce fight every morning till late in the evening. We hear sounds of explosions. That is going on. The kind of fight and operations that are underway is not just in the outskirts of Donetsk, but far within eastern Ukrainian territories, because they are now intent on taking all those territories that are considered part of Donetsk Oblast, that's the Donetsk region, and Luhansk Oblast, that's the Luhansk region. So they are looking at now consolidation and this fierce fight that's going on in the entire region on the eastern front of Ukraine and southern front of Ukraine.
So Russia's focus clearly is where you are, Geeta, in eastern Ukraine. Thanks for the moment, Geeta. Stay safe out there. We'll keep coming across to you for those updates. 44 days now of this war in Ukraine. And what we're seeing, as Geeta and I also just pointed out, is that it is along eastern Ukraine now that Russian troops are gathering and getting set for an all-out assault. But what's also coming to light now, with Russian troops withdrawing from several parts of the scenes of devastation after the Bucha massacre, Ukraine President Zelensky has now said that the situation in the town of Boryanka, again a town near Kyiv, is significantly more dreadful than what's happened in Kyiv. Other cities, meanwhile, have also been crippled by relentless attacks from Russia. The port city of Mariupol is in complete ruins. You've got buildings completely burnt, charred vehicles. Several deaths have also been reported in Mariupol. Authorities in Ukraine have also said that Mariupol has seen maximum casualties. Locals are seen rescuing several civilians who've been grievously injured in some of the attacks and some of the assaults by Russian troops. We've been telling you what's been happening in Bucha. The kind of images and videos that we've been getting also show you and give you a sense of what's really happening in the aftermath of the massacre in Bucha.
The work to clear the rubble in Borodyanka has begun. It's significantly more dreadful there. Even more victims from the Russian occupiers. And what will happen when the world learns the whole truth about what the Russian military did in Mariupol? There, on almost every street, is what the world saw in Bucha and other towns in the Kyiv region after the withdrawal of Russian troops. The same cruelty, the same terrible crimes.
Now this is a team that is on standby. It's slowly going forward, inching forward, trying to look for survivors in this rubble. This building, according to information given by people here, was destroyed in an airstrike and emergency workers could not get here in time. But some locals say there could be survivors here, and that is why the focus is on this building, one of the many that have been targeted here in Berdyansk. So healthcare workers and emergency workers are all here standing by amidst locals saying that they've heard voices coming from inside this rubble, and that is why their effort is to try and get into this area. What they're also doing here is trying to put oxygen through a pipe and trying to send food down, because if people had gone down and found a cavity to survive, in case voices are still being heard in the rubble, they're hoping against hope that there would be survivors inside and perhaps in a bunker or a basement. So food packets are here, water is here, doctors are on standby, all in an effort to find survivors amidst this wrecked building destroyed in an airstrike, another building destroyed in a missile strike here in Berdyansk, Ukraine. It's only now that healthcare workers and emergency services have been able to reach here, and they still say it's a race against time to save lives. With cameraman Lalit Mohan Joshi in Berdyansk, Ukraine, Gaurav Sawant for India Today.
Now, it's because of these scenes, perhaps, of death, of destruction in cities like Bucha and Berdyansk, that's led to this step, this drastic step at the United Nations of Russia being thrown out of the Human Rights Council. There was global outrage over what's played out in Bucha. But even as this kind of a step has been taken by Russia, against Russia, really, Moscow has claimed that they have nothing to do with what's playing out in Bucha. They've said that this entire massacre was orchestrated and staged by Ukraine to derail peace talks, even as Ukraine has maintained that this is genocide.
Venturing out from homes, navigating through streets littered with bodies, rummaging through the rubble for belongings. Images from Bucha that revealed the horrific side of Russian President Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine have stunned the world. While the exact toll is not available, the mayor of Bucha claims more than 90% of the bodies have bullet wounds and not shrapnels.
So bad is the situation that Tatya has just buried her child who was killed in shelling right here. And she broke down as she explained that to me, that the child must be very cold.
Ukraine and its Western allies say there is enough evidence to prove Russian soldiers committed war crimes in Bucha.
Prohibited weapons were used to target civilian objects, and we certainly know that they were uncontrolled. We can classify this as a war crime, and we investigate this. Many cities in Ukraine, I can mention only several regions which did not get into. The rest of the territory was affected. Anyway, the crime of aggression concerns the whole country.
Moscow has rejected the charges and called the allegations a monstrous forgery.
In the entire course of events, a huge amount of data, facts and other parameters do clearly witness that this is a forgery conducted to try and smear the Russian army. It will not work.
Claims and counterclaims are flying thick and fast since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Kyiv claims Russians bombed a children's hospital in Mariupol that killed over 50 people.
They are already launching a false campaign to hide their own guilt in the mass killings of civilians in Mariupol. They will do dozens of staged interviews, re-edited recordings, and will kill people specifically to make it look like they were killed by someone else.
Russians, on the other hand, point to testimonies of people they claim to have rescued from Mariupol.
They occupied the floor of the traumatology department in the hospital, installed grenade launchers and started shooting. There is another one nearby with probably 100 people, including children and the wounded. So we were told that we were given 15 minutes to evacuate, run or whatever, and then the Ukrainians would mine the entire building.
The killings of Bucha have prompted worldwide condemnation. India too has condemned the murders committed in the Ukrainian city.
Condemn the killings which have taken place there.
The West is scaling up its efforts to corner Russia over alleged war crimes. France has already opened 3 investigations. But getting Putin to answer for the alleged war crimes could be near impossible. With Gaurav Sawant in Bucha, Bureau Report, India Today.
44 days of the war in Ukraine, and what we want to do now is to show you the kind of devastation that's been reported in many cities of Ukraine, starting with Bucha. We're going to show you an aerial view of what the city looked like before and what everyone's talking about, those civilian bodies. Remember that this is very close to the Ostomel airport. It's in the suburbs of Kyiv. Now, if you really go into what the layout of Bucha looks like, a bustling city, as you see on your screens, there's so many buildings. Mind you, this is before the war, before all the destruction. This building that you see on your screens here is the St. Andrew's Church. And the reason we're showing this to you is because it's around here that those horrifying mass graves were actually discovered. These pictures are of the graves that we've been showing you and that it's been found by the Ukrainian troops once the Russian troops moved back. Along the trenches of this church, they've dug right through, and there have been bodies that have been pulled out for the last many days. Horrifying scenes that have been witnessed all along the St. Andrew's Church in the heart of Bucha is where these bodies were found, roughly dug out across that area. That's where it was seen. Let's also tell you what the situation is in other parts of Ukraine. We've shown you what Bucha looks like. Ostomel Airport, very close to Bucha, as we showed you. This is a place and an airbase strategically hugely important. It's very close to Kyiv, which is why in the very start of this invasion, in the very start of this war, Russia started targeting this massive airbase. They started bombing it. There were air assaults. And what I also want to highlight here is that you see these hangars in this particular sequencing that we're showing you. It's within this hangar that you had Mriya, which means dream in Ukrainian, the world's largest aircraft stationed here. And what you see right now of this once beautiful, huge airbase and of this beautiful aircraft is nothing but debris. Piles of rubble that's left behind as a result of Russian bombing. Let's tell you now what's happening also in another city, port city of Mariupol, close to the Sea of Azov, as you see here. As we zoom in closer to the city, again, let me highlight this is before the war, so you see how lovely the entire layout of this particular city is. This is in fact the regional drama theatre, the Donetsk Regional Drama Theatre in Mariupol. It's a huge property. You can see around it also there are buildings. And while this massive building stands in this particular aerial footage that we're showing you, let's show you what it looks like now. Horrifying to see the kind of destruction. That entire circle that you see around has been completely ruined. The green is now completely removed. The building, this is what it looks like now because of an airstrike by Russian troops. Ukraine has maintained that this building, this drama theatre, was actually serving as a shelter and was targeted by Russia with a clear aim of ensuring that civilians also are dead. But this particular sequence that we've just shown you here highlights the grim reality of war, what it does to bustling, beautiful cities, to iconic places and architecture in these cities of Ukraine. Let's in fact move on and get you a report about Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, and what's been happening in the last 44 days of this war. Now, Vladimir Putin had in fact declared war, the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, on February 24th. And since then, things clearly haven't gone the way Russia hoped it would. They've had to change their strategy because they were hoping for a swift victory. A month later, that seems to be a distant dream. The reason for that is a zealous Ukraine, which has forced Putin now to change his strategy.
On 24th March, a month into the war, Ukraine's navy sank the Russian ship Orks in the Sea of Azov. The attack destroyed a ship laden with supplies. It also drove other Russian ships back into the sea and damaged Berdyansk port. It was a crucial blow to Putin's military plans.
The fact that the war has been going on as long as it has without it being a decisive victory yet for Russia gives hope to Ukraine. I think in some respects this action will backfire on Putin because Ukraine might even be closer to the West, which is exactly his opposite outcome that he desired.
Putin's special operation in Ukraine was supposed to end in a swift victory. It was never supposed to cross 30 days. But what he didn't take into account was the zeal of Ukrainians to fight for their country.
I've taken the decision to conduct a special military operation. Its purpose is to protect people who have been subject to abuse and genocide by the Kiev regime for 8 years. And to do this, we will strive to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine.
Things surely did not go as Putin planned. Russia launched its attack from two sides on 24th February. While one part of its troops moved in from Belarus and attacked Ukraine from north, another approached from the eastern flank along the Donbas separatists. After standing outside Kyiv for days, the Russian military announced a strategic change in plans. This was exactly 5 days after Ukraine's marine attack on the Sea of Azov.
Some of the operations we see are borderline amateurish. They are very quick to fail. They are very prone to ambushes from Ukrainian forces. So overall, they might have tried to chew a bit more than they can bite, or the other way around, and biting into Ukrainian territory, which calls for a reassessment now. The problem is that the Kremlin needs to turn this operation into a form of victory, whatever the cost. There will be a necessary face-saving for Putin himself, because he just can't back down, right, and declare that the operation is off.
The decision taken at Istanbul hit road bumps soon after the Russian and Ukrainian sides left Turkey. After first 30 days, Russia started to retreat from the north and concentrate on the south and east.
It looked as if the Russians have been beaten, clearly, in Kiev. They've given up on trying to take Kiev for the time being. We thought they'd probably tried to give up on taking Odessa because they're not making much progress. They're even further away from Mykolaiv than they were last week. So they're being pushed away from Odessa, not towards it. However, if they're going to reorganize and try to move into the southeast of the country, in the Donbas region, and then push this land bridge all the way across the southern coast of Ukraine, all the way through Crimea to Odessa, then it may be that will become part of their strategic requirement again, and we might see a renewed attempt to take Odessa. But I have to say, they're still quite a long way from doing that, and I think that the Russians will find that they've got a pretty tough fight in the Donbas, because they'll be up against the best of the Ukrainian forces, who are all concentrated, and as they have been for the last 8 years, in that southeastern part of the country.
But the retreat came at a cost. Bodies littered all over Bucha, the most horrific episode of the war. Ukraine claimed it was a war crime. The world joined in. Russia denied a hand in the killings, saying its troops had left Bucha days before the bodies were found. But the world backed Ukraine. More sanctions were imposed on Russia by the US, UK and others, and more arms were pledged to it. An even more isolated Putin is now fully focused on Ukraine's east and south, hoping somehow to salvage his pride. Bureau Report, India Today.
And let's now get you an excerpt of a conversation that Rajdeep Sardesai had with Rebecca Koffler. She is a Russian-born US specialist, intelligence specialist, and she served also as a Russia doctrine and strategy specialist in America.
President Putin is not ready to retreat at all. This is just not something that he does. His personality and life experience are such that he has learned he only has to fight back when he's cornered. Things have not gone well or according to plan, according to Vladimir Putin. And at this point, you're correct. He is regrouping and trying to figure out his next step. He's not retreating.
You're saying he's not retreating, he's only regrouping. But as a Putin watcher, could this be his last stand? There are those who are suggesting that next time this year, Vladimir Putin won't be around in Russia. He cannot afford to lose this battle in Ukraine. Do you subscribe to that view that in a way you could see a more desperate Putin in the weeks ahead?
Oh, he's definitely desperate because, like I said, he miscalculated the Ukrainians' will to fight, President Zelensky's leadership. He underestimated how much support the West will provide in terms of weaponry and also moral support from financial institutions withdrawing and companies withdrawing from Russia, such as Visa, MasterCard, Starbucks, you name it. But his life experience is such is that when he's cornered like a rat, which is a specific experience that he had when he was a child, he has to fight back. And what I would expect right now, a nuclear escalation from Putin to make this conflict go down, de-escalate. It's a specific doctrine that was developed on Putin's orders, and that is what I expect to see next from him.
You know, you're saying something very important because I've seen even in your book, you believe there are 5 major instruments in Putin's playbook. You include space warfare, cyber warfare, military options such as escalation, and the nuclear option as well as espionage. You seem to be suggesting that Mr. Putin will use the nuclear option to threaten the West and will continue to do so. Am I correct?
You are absolutely correct. This is exactly the type of situation that the escalate to de-escalate doctrine was developed for. Remember, Putin's ultimate concern and his fear is that Ukraine, if he does not control it, Ukraine will become part of NATO. And it's not acceptable to Putin because the distance between St. Petersburg, the second largest city in Moscow, and NATO forces has reduced from the Cold War to today from 1,000 miles to 100 miles. That is shorter than the distance between Washington and New York. And that is unacceptable for Putin and any military commander. So this is why you see him fighting with bringing everything, to the table, including targeting civilians. He is not playing by any kind of rules. He's not observing the rules of armed conflict. He is plowing through like a madman, but he is rational. He's not mentally stable. This is how he fights. This is how the Russian warfare has been for centuries.